আমি যেহেতু ইকোনমিস্ট, হয়তো ইকোনমিক্স, আমাদের ইকোনমিক ক্রাইসিস কোন দিকে কি কি কাজ আমাদের হাই প্রায়োরিটি ভিত্তিক করা উচিত, তো সেই কথাটা আগে একটু বলি। আর আর দুই একটা কথা এখনো কারো কাছ থেকে শুনি নাই, শুধু এই ইভেন্টটাই না, মানে আমি যত অ্যাক্টিভিস্টের সাথে আহ, যোগ দিয়েছি গত 1 মাস ধরে, তাদের কাছ থেকে যেগুলা কথা আমি শুনি নাই, সেই কথাটা একটা আপনাদের সামনে তুলে ধরতে চাই। হ্যাঁ। তো প্রথমত ইকোনমিক্স দিক থেকে তো আমাদের হাই প্রায়োরিটি কি হওয়া উচিত। হ্যাঁ, তো আমি যখনই মিডিয়ার সাথে কথা বলেছি, আহ, এইভাবে আমি চিন্তা করলাম যে ধরেন আমাদের 48 ঘন্টা বা 72 ঘন্টায় কি করা প্রয়োজন, আমাদের 7 দিনে কি করা প্রয়োজন, আর 30 দিনে কি করা প্রয়োজন। তো প্রথম কথা যেটা অলরেডি এই ইন্টারিম গভর্নমেন্টের কাছে চলে আসছে, মানে উনারাই বলেছে যে ল রি এস্টাবলিশিং ল অ্যান্ড অর্ডার, আইন শৃঙ্খলা রক্ষা করা, এটা আমাদের প্রথম কাজ। তো সেই কাজে আমি আমি খুব খুশি হয়েছি যখন ডক্টর ইউনুস এই 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 কথাটাই প্রথমে মিডিয়াকে এই কথাটাই বলেছে। আর আর ওইটাও দেখে খুশি খুশি হয়েছে যে আমাদের যে আন্দোলনকারী ছাত্রছাত্রীরা, যে তারা আহ, আন্তরিকতার সাথে আহ, যে বিভিন্ন শহরে যেখানে যারা স্টুডেন্টরা থাকে, যে খুব শৃঙ্খলার সাথে রাস্তা পরিষ্কারের কাজ, ট্রাফিক ম্যানেজমেন্টের কাজ, আর মোটামুটি বলা যায় দেশ গড়ার কাজ তারা হাতে নিয়েছে। আর কিন্তু আসলে কিন্তু এটা তো ছাত্রছাত্রীর কাজ না, এটা তো আলটিমেটলি তো আমাদের পুলিশ আর ল অ্যান্ড অর্ডার ফোর্সেস এর কাজ। তো তো সেই তাদেরকে আবার we have to make them feel comfortable and confident that that the amount of retribution will be limited, so that because we really need to get the police forces and people who support those institutions, law and order institutions, we need to get them back to work, right? তারপর 7 দিনের কি কাজ? 7 দিনের কাজ হলো যে we need to explain to the rest of the world that we are open back up for business. Of course, this has been a shock. It's going to result in an economic shock, but we need to limit the effects on the broader economy. And for that, we need to make sure that H&M, Walmart, etc., continues to think of Bangladesh as a premium destination for giving orders for ready-made garments, right? That we will deliver on time, that our infrastructure is working, right? We need to be open back up for business, and we need to convey to the rest of the world, all of us, that we are indeed open for business, and we can deliver on time. Right. Similarly, we need to make sure that our migrant brothers and sisters continue to feel confident to send remittances back to their families back home, right? Because that's yet another important source of foreign exchange for the country. Right? So that, I would say, is hopefully in the next 14 days, if these sectors can open back up for business, that's going to be high priority. Right? Another issue that came up, so let me now talk about macroeconomic issues. Right? I was very happy to see the announcement about the new Bangladesh Bank governor. I do firmly believe that he is the person in the best position to get us back on track. He has a wealth of experience working at the International Monetary Fund, and has had sort of country office assignments in the Middle East through his IMF job. So that was a very good move. But there has been a lack of transparency in terms of our currency reserve positions, in terms of our macroeconomic stability, the health and strength of our banking sector. And to make international investors feel confident, right? These things need to come out to the fore. The lack of transparency has to go. Yeah. And then finally, the topic that Safad Bhai just talked about, which is, I would call it stolen asset recovery, right? It is going to be complicated, but it's also the case that there have been established protocols, a precedent set by other countries, where when dictatorial regimes and autocratic regimes have been pushed out of power, right, in other countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, that there have been established protocols and offices and mechanisms for countries to be able to recover those stolen assets and use it for development in the country, or at least use it as part of our, by freezing assets that might be sitting elsewhere outside the country. If we could freeze those assets, maybe we can use it to bolster our foreign exchange reserve positions, right? I think that has to be also a high priority. And the reason is that the longer it takes, we can't really, we need to work on those mechanisms right away. We can't wait for, 10-year court cases. And the reason is that the longer it takes, the more difficult it will become for us to track down where those stolen funds are. right? So that's something, whether, it's unclear how successful we'll be, but I think that has to be taken as high priority, and we need to start moving on that, by the way. So those are the things that I think we need to put a lot of emphasis on. Right now, I want to turn to at my final set of comments from my last minute or so. I want to turn to something that people have not been talking about, right? I haven't heard much from the government. I haven't heard much from activists inside or outside the country. And that is that this revolution for the past month really has been an urban phenomenon, almost by definition, because it was a student-led revolution, and universities are located in urban areas. Into what we're missing is that বাংলাদেশে প্রায় 68% লোক গ্রামাঞ্চলে বাস করে। So if we want economic recovery, we really need to be thinking about what's happening to those 68% of people who were not, like front and center in this revolution, but in order to rebuild the country, we really need to think about that part of the economy, like the rural development portion, right? So I don't think we've yet announced, an advisor in the caretaker government who would be in charge of, say, the agriculture sector, right? So that has to be taken very seriously, and I hope that's the direction we'll be moving. আর এই কথাটা আমার খেয়াল হলো কেন যে আমরা যখন দেখলাম মানে অগস্ট 5-এর ধরেন 1-2 দিন পরে যখন ওই আইন শৃঙ্খলা একদম অবস্থা খারাপ হয়ে গেল, তখন দেখা গেল যে ওই আরবান এরিয়াতে, শহরগুলোতে কিছু কিছু ব্যবস্থা ছিল যে লোকজন যারা ছিল তারা হয়তো পাড়ায় পাড়ায় লাঠি নিয়ে, বা ছাত্রছাত্রীরা ধরেন বিভিন্ন সম্প্রদায়ের মানুষকে রক্ষা করা, হ্যাঁ, তো সেই কাজগুলো তারা শহরে হয়তো করছিল, কিন্তু একদম গ্রামাঞ্চলে, in remote rural areas, that's where people were most vulnerable, right? So I saw that type of an urban bias in our response, which was natural, it's understandable, right? But we need to be aware of that, and right now, going forward, we need to be aware of that blind spot we might have where we have too much of an urban bias, and we need to start thinking systematically about rural development again. Right? Just because most people in Bangladesh are not people like you and me. Most people in Bangladesh actually live in rural areas. They're engaged in other sectors, not in the financial sector, not in professional sectors, right? But we need to think about them very seriously now. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mobarak. Very, very interesting contribution. I think I have one question from one of the participants that within your time you can probably attempt to answer it, though it's quite broad. How do you ensure that the endemic corruption that exists in the society is not an obstruction to recovering laundered money?
Yeah, so that's what they say, $1 million question, but more like a $15 lakh koti dollar question, or $15 lakh koti taka question. So let me, I mean, that's a excellent question, and probably, we could probably talk about that for an hour, which I won't do, right? So let me say this instead. I'm going to give you, with the apologies to the person asking the question, I want to give you a much more general answer. Right? So a lot of us are, I mean, I'm sure many people in the room like me are excited about the possibilities, right? That there's this idea of a Bangladesh 2.0, that we'll have a fundamentally different country going forward, that all of us can be proud of, all of us will be very happy to contribute to, and those of us in the diaspora might be willing to move back and help build the country, right? So we're all excited about that. But the thing is that if the fundamental systems don't change, right? If our the source of power, which is really street level battles, right? Chhatra League versus Chhatra Dal versus Shibir, right? And also the grassroots power that they have in all across the country. If those power structures remain the same, if that's the source of political power, I don't feel too optimistic, right, that we're going to be able to do any fundamental changes to this corrupt system, right? So I am really hopeful personally. Now I'm just speaking like as a personal avedon. I'm really hopeful that maybe some new structures will emerge, that we are able to dismantle some of the more corrupt and destructive structures in our country and replace them with something new, right? It can't just be about, oh, let's solve this problem with stolen asset recovery and talk to this country. It can't just be, let's have this, change in banking regulation, right? I think we need to work on those fundamental power structures.